Hello, Kieran from GMR Spares here, and you join me at my workbench, as usual, but this time we have a new product on the workbench called the Fetoplex. Now the Fetoplex is a recreation of the preamp section from an Echoplex EP3 tape echo. A lot of people in the early 70s onwards used the Echoplex as there weren't any other echo pedals around at the time. They didn't have the analog technology, they didn't have the digital technology to do delays, so they used tape delays. But a quirk of using an Echoplex tape delay is that even when the echo isn't engaged, the signal of your guitar still goes through the preamp section. The preamp section on an Echoplex adds gain, more drive, and more mid-range to the sound. It's like the secret ingredient to most 70s guitar sounds. Everyone from Jimmy Page to Steve Howe to Randy Rhoads, Ace Frehley, everyone was using an Echoplex. Now, where the Fetoplex differs from the Echoplex circuitry, the Fetoplex actually uses point-to-point hand wiring on the GMR Spares miniature tag board, as we've already seen in previous videos about the BC Bender. The second way that this differs from an Echoplex preamp section is that we actually have a volume control on the preamp section, which allows us to actually turn down the amount of boost we're getting and actually use it in other ways, which I'll show you at the end of the video. So as I've already said, everyone used an Echoplex at the time. So let's have some audio examples. The first set of audio examples are of the man himself, Jimmy Page. For a long time I've been wondering, how did Jimmy Page get that bite and that treble out of the amps that he was using? I thought, yeah, it's a 59 Les Paul, that must be it. I don't think it was. It's playing 100 watt Marshalls all the way up. I don't think it was. I definitely think it was the Echoplex. It just gives that little bit of bite to everything. Another famous user of the Echoplex was Joe Walsh. He used those in James Gang, the Eagles, and in his solo work. He used Fender amps that have a really scoop mid-range, which don't usually lend themselves to high gain kind of sounds. So using the Echoplex and the quirks of it going through the preamp all the time, he was actually able to boost the mid-range and get those classic tones. Here are some examples. sticking with a Fender-ish kind of tonality, also Steve Howe from the band Yes was a big Echoplex user, and often I thought, well, archtop guitars through a Fender amp must give that kind of rasp to the playing, but it wasn't. It was the Echoplex he was using. Here's an example of how Steve Howe used the Echoplex. As I've already said, anyone used an Echoplex back in the 70s, anyone from Ace Frehley right through to Randy Rhoads, and here's two examples of how they would use the Echoplex in their tones to get those classic overdriven sounds that are just a little bit out of the capabilities of most of the amplifiers at the time. As I've said previously, there is a difference between the Fetoplex and a normal Echoplex preamp, in that we have a volume for the guitar signal. Echoplexes would have had a volume for the echo coming out. The amount of boost you would get from the preamp would be set all the time within an Echoplex. You wouldn't be able to turn that down using anything other than the volume on your guitar. But because I was doing lots of research into the Echoplex, I did find a modified Echoplex that Brian May used to use for his solo sections during Queen concerts. Obviously he's very famous for using stereo delays, and he actually had a unit that was modified to have a longer tape, but also it had a volume control, which meant that he could turn down the amount of boost that the Echoplex was giving him so it wouldn't differ from his other tones. I thought that was a really good idea, and I thought of a different use for a volume control on it. Rather than, like we've been doing in all the other examples, boosting the signal to get more drive, I thought, well, why can't we use a driven sound on the amp, then use the Fetoplex to actually turn down the level and use it sort of like the volume controlling guitar, but with loads more treble and loads more clarity. So in this last example, the volume control is set down, so we just get a mild crunch from the amp, and then when we switch off the effect, we get the full force of the drive of the amp. This example is kind of a little bit influenced by AC/DC, and I imagined that there's only one of me, but there's two guitarists in AC/DC. There would be Angus and Malcolm, and in a lot of their songs, when they both play together, they get this big thick sound of two people playing together, but in a lot of the verses it's just Malcolm playing on his own. So off the cuff, I improvised a little thing that would be sort of like an AC/DC kind of thing. Fetoplex is available here in a fully made form and also as a kit. Both are available from the eBay shop and the Facebook shop. All the examples we're using the Fender Champion 600, which is modified here at GMR. All the modifications and instructions to do that are available from the eBay shop and the Facebook shop. Thanks for watching.